So what does it actually mean to stand up for trans rights? It shouldn't be that hard of a question. But in this political climate, it's tough to see through all the smoke and mirrors. We now have trans people seemingly joining the fight against trans people, and their defense being, "Oh, well, don't worry. I'm just against the trans people that don't make sense, like the they thems or like the trans trenders. And I'm just trying to bring some sense to all of this nonsense so that the whole world can at least take some of us trans people seriously." And I have a lot of compassion for this perspective because it's alluring for sure, but it doesn't help our cause. At the end of the day, gender critical ideology is dangerous for trans people. Its logical end is always going to be barring access to care. Those gender critical trans folks are catering to those who actually don't support our right to exist at all. These people might not think that's what's happening, but I just don't understand. I just don't get how you can't see that, like, that type of rhetoric, can be harmful. But let's look into it, and let's take a look at what gender critical people believe. And then we're going to talk about maybe some of this stuff can be useful. Also, we'll talk about some of the different levels of gender criticalness and kind of some of the logical conclusion. I'll also kind of review a little bit of that video that Marcus made about me. And yeah, we're talking about a lot of different things. Okay, so I hope, like I said, I hope that my internet stays decent during this time. All right, so let's start with the definition of gender critical. This was like such the quickest like video I could find on it. So we'll start there. Okay.
What are gender critical beliefs? We say a woman is an adult human female and a man is an adult human male. There are no other meaningful, coherent, non-circular and truthful definitions of the words woman and man. A female human...
Obviously, I would disagree with that. Let me know if you guys can hear that. Basically, the idea that a woman is an adult human female and a man is an adult human male. I think these categories are useful for some reasons, like medical things and maybe like ease of categorization and things like that. But gender is much more, sex is even really complicated. I forget how many ways there are a lot. I don't want to like speak on things that I don't really understand fully. But I do understand that sex is complicated. And sometimes things don't have a neat definition. Just because we don't understand something fully doesn't mean we get to say this is definitely what it is and there's no chance that it can be anything different. I agree that the majority of women are probably adult human females, but that I guess it's not an inclusive, like it doesn't include everybody. And these people aren't really interested in inclusion, that's for sure.
Human is one whose developmental pathway is towards the production of ova, while for a human male, it is towards the production of sperm. Sometimes people are born with disorders of the reproductive tract and they are infertile, but they are still either male or female. In the interest...
That's kind of the discussion about intersex people, when people will say things like, oh, basically that intersex people represent kind of like the sexed version of there being kind of like a blend or a spectrum of sexes. Therefore saying that like, okay, then maybe gender is the same way. But they would just kind of say like, intersex people are either male or female. They just have like certain kind of differences or something like that. Or you might have some type of chromosomal changes or something like that that don't mean that you produce, like maybe the average male or something like that. I guess it feels annoying to reduce a person's body down to their ability to reproduce. But I know like sex is obviously about like reproduction. Like, I mean, the kind of differentiation between bodies, not necessarily the act itself. I mean, whatever. You know what I'm saying? This kind of reminds me of people who just kind of, say like sex is only for the marriage, or well, not just only for, well, that is something that they say, but I mean like only for procreation, and that's kind of its main function, and that shouldn't be tampered with. It was designed for this reason, so let's keep it this way. Kind of the same thing with gender. Gender is supposed to be this way. This is how it was meant to be. We can't change it, otherwise we're, going against logical reasoning. This type of stuff makes us seem like we're insane, like we're the crazy ones for being like, oh, maybe it's actually not that easy to just say that this is exactly what a man is, this is exactly what a woman is. Yeah.
Of women's privacy, dignity, comfort, and safety, certain spaces are and should remain for women and girls only. This isn't to say that.
So this is another common argument. Like as soon as we talk about the trans conversation, it somehow leans over to like trans women are dangerous, basically. Yeah, a lot of times in like these types of gender critical spaces, basically you're taught to fear the idea of the trans woman, like the non-passing trans woman who, like doesn't look like your typical average woman or something like that. And their presence in a bathroom, making everybody uncomfortable. And that disgust is used to help fuel, I don't know, support for this idea. No, but there's not a lot of people who are going to say, I mean, when it's put like this, you sound like the bad guy when you're like, we should let, you know what I'm saying? Like people should be able to choose what bathrooms they're in. But when you're like, oh, there's danger for little girls and women, and people are like, oh man, it just like speaks to people's sensitivity and their disgust when you talk about, a big hairy woman. I don't think she said that in this video, but it is something that is said in these circles.
That those things aren't important to men too, but it is to recognize that the vast majority of crimes of a sexual nature in public areas and public spaces are not committed by women, are they? For the same reasons, certain.
Yeah, I think that is an accurate thing. I would research it, but I don't really feel like it. I think that's an accurate statement. I guess that also doesn't still mean that like trans women are still going to be, violent offenders. I'm not even sure if you want to put them in the same category or anything like that. But just saying that like this group of people like are the most violent, therefore women need to be protected or something like that. Like, I don't know if the logic pans out entirely. It just doesn't seem to work fully for me. Yeah, let me just listen to that part one again. Oh yeah, just like wanting to keep public spaces safe. Like most often you're dealing with a person who's going to go to the bathroom to do their business and leave and not harass people. If people want to harass people, they're going to do that. And they don't have to do the trans thing in order to harass people in a bathroom even. Like it just stinks. This stuff, she's talking about not having circular arguments, but I think some of her arguments don't fully pan out either.
Not committed by women, are they? For the same reasons, certain jobs, like counselling the female survivors of sexual assaults, should be only for women.
Look at that, exactly, by Charlie saying, by that argument, they should be protecting trans folks since they are much more likely to be assaulted. Exactly. If we're talking about who is the most at risk for violence, we're talking trans people. That's pretty much it. We deserve to be
of
protected.
safety and fairness, most sports should be single sex. In other words,
there was the other kind of the trans sports situation. I think that there is, valid this is an important issue to talk about. Maybe it shouldn't be politicized. I heard someone else say that, this topic should be reserved for like exercise sciences and things like that. And maybe like obviously like trans people, that's probably also an important person to include in this conversation, not necessarily like politicians and news anchors and stuff like that. Their opinions are just opinions. We should look into research, things that we can act like. So yeah, we should not be going off of feelings. I feel that this person is going to win against the other women, or I feel like, you know what I'm saying? We need evidence. That way we can actually make good decisions. And that way governments aren't making decisions based on their feelings and their fears. They're making decisions based off of what works for human beings.
People's claimed gender identity is not more important than the reality of their biological sex in determining what they are. And that, in a nutshell, is what gender critics believe.
Great. So, and that's pretty much it. That's the end of the video, or the end of at least like this part of what she says. So, like, she's saying that this like people's gender identity shouldn't be more important than, I guess, like other people's safety. And I don't know, it doesn't seem like a comparison that really works overall, because we're not talking, because the conversation about trans rights issues isn't even about women's safety. We're not talking about that. We're talking about whether, like, how to help trans people exist and not want to, you know, unalive themselves. How to help trans people, like, you know, access things like name changes and other things that are actually important for us, rather than just, I don't know, like talking about things that don't really matter. But, you know, what do I know? And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is is there any way that gender critical ideas can be useful? I wanted to share, I guess, one other YouTube channel that I've watched before, and I didn't have a video particularly of theirs that I wanted to look at. I just think that they have interesting ideas. So I'll just show you. Okay. So their name is, I think his name, yeah. I think he uses he, him pronouns. His name is Godless Snowshoer, his channel. And I'm trying to make this a little bit, it looks so small on this thing, so I'm trying to make it look, sorry about that. Okay, so like they make videos about a lot of different things, but I wanted to just show you a couple of their, okay, so like they make a video about like transmedicalism and gatekeeping, like they talk about trans discourse, different things like that. So let's say an inclusionist trans person is like, I just think that it's important to define terms. So like an inclusionist trans person is someone who says kind of like, maybe you don't need dysphoria. You don't necessarily need dysphoria to be trans. Maybe like more expansive definitions of the word trans, not necessarily only making it some type of a mental illness type of a situation. I think, and also there are different types of like gender critical and trans medical things. And I don't necessarily want to conflate these things entirely, because there do seem to be some differences. But where they have connections, I think that it's, where they have overlapping connections, it's important to talk about. Like, I appreciate a lot of their videos because they're anti-theist. I'm pretty, I don't know how much I've talked about my spirituality here. I don't know. I've been leaning towards like anti-theist ideas. I'm not sure what I'll claim in terms of my actual beliefs, but I appreciate a lot of their content. And so they have a lot of opinions, things like autism, like they believe that autism doesn't impact your gender. A lot of people believe other things. Like maybe in another video, when we're going to talk about transmedicalism specifically, we can watch like this video or something like that. But yeah, so what I think might be, like I'm saying, the point of me bringing them up is talking about what may be helpful. I think that, for example, for non-dysphoric trans people to kind of like, I saw someone else post something like this and I thought it was useful, but like for non-dysphoric trans people to center themselves in a discussion where like one of the primary situations is like helping people get access to like care, trans-related healthcare. And if you don't need access to healthcare, you can just be a supportive person and kind of helping other people. So my opinion is like, it is more important that we get healthcare than it is that like, I don't know, even my pronouns are used correctly. Like, I don't know if that's bad to say, but I care more about people being able to access care than like, for example, like any type of rule to kind of like not allow people to like, I don't know, say mean things about trans people. People are allowed to have other opinions. It just is kind of annoying. Yeah, it seems to be a weak biological deterministic argument that doesn't take into account the complexity of science. That's just the truth. The only thing is like, we're asking people to just like take the science seriously. And the Godless Snowshoe does have a lot of, they do bring a lot of like science into their perspective, into his perspective. I'm sorry, I keep misgendering him. They bring a lot of science into he brings a lot of science to his perspective. And I think that's helpful in a lot of ways. And can be, honestly, I think that a lot of transmedicalist ideas can be affirming. Because I think like when it feels like, maybe like if your gender identity is connected to your biology, maybe it makes it feel more real or something like that. And I think I can understand why someone would want to kind of adopt those ideas. But also at the same time, I don't want to necessarily say a lot of things when I haven't really entirely reviewed all of the science. I'm not going to claim that I have. I'm just kind of talking about what I actually do know. And there are also some people who I would consider moderates in this community. I don't know community, people with this idea. All right. So I found kind of a person who you might consider being like a very transmedicalist light, or gender critical light. There are some echoes of the whole transmedical idea, but also this one particular guy who I'm going to be talking about, or kind of just watching like some of his video and like just talking about some of his opinions. I agree with some of them, and I think that maybe he might be onto something, but at the same time, I'm not sure if I agree with everything. But let's go over this together. Okay, it's a 40s. We're at 40 seconds. And so from there, this is another trans talking about some of his experiences and thoughts. And I think that it's important to hear from other trans people when we talk about these things as well. Okay.
Of the video that I officially,
title
as a part of the trans community, because it's several with many of you as a community. Because it's usually a hard hit when someone comes out and says, "Oh, I'm detransitioning," because times when these stories come out, the people who stand against the community will, in fact, weaponize these stories.
This attitude in the trans community that if you question your transition, that makes you insane.
And say, "Oh yeah, you see that guy right there? Yeah, he didn't like it, so he's out of there, and so are you." So it's like, it's understandable. But at the same time, even with the detransitioners that come out, they end up being completely ostracized by the community as a result of that weaponization.
It is difficult when you realize that you need to detransition for a variety of strong reasons, and then the community you're part of rejects you.
The detransitioner will use their story against the trans community. So it's just a big mess when it pertains to detransitioning. However, my detransition is not.
Okay, I agree with him totally. I think that the detransition conversation is really weird and like unhealthy the way that it's happening right now. I think there are some people who are talking about it in a way that I think is really great and respectable. I think that there are other people who had like really used this to just, I don't know, really weaponize things, like really weaponize it against the trans community as a whole, and that is really upsetting. I really hate it so much. Makes me feel sad, like really sad. Kind of like the whole thing. If it didn't work for you, that's okay. Like, don't make it crappy for the rest of us, type of a thing.
The time that you are, because I'm saying trans, okay? I'm saying trans, okay? So surprise, okay. I'm still going to be identifying as a trans man.
You are a transgender.
However, I would much rather say that I.
Also, by the way, if you have not watched that one interview where the guy's like, "Why are you gay?" Like the guy from, I think it's the Ugandan pastor. It's such a funny video. It's kind of like a funny and like a very offensive way. Like it's very offensive to like trans being gay people, but like it was humorous to watch. So that's for free.
I am transitioning from the social of the trans community. What does it mean? I was part of the.
That's a good question. One of my thoughts is kind of like, if you're going to detransition, I think I don't know. Obviously, I definitely agree with clickbait. I think clickbait is fine. He definitely did this for clickbait. But yeah, talking about like leaving the trans community, I guess I don't necessarily understand that entirely. Like, I don't know. Does that mean like, I think maybe leaving the community might mean leaving the spaces in the community, perhaps leaving the trans community, like I guess changing some of your ideas, but we'll hear from him what that means.
Simply means I am completely associated in the establishment. But as far as my identity and what I represent, I will always be, unless I come to a different conclusion with my life. But for the most part, that's just kind of where I stand with it. And I mean, at least some me, I, my views, a lot of my values, a lot of my morals just does not remotely align with the trans community. And if you at all think differently from what is popularly believed in the community, then you are therefore ostracized. You are therefore pushed aside.
So I think this is another problem that I want to talk about that he brings up, which is great. It's not really that healthy to just push people away because they have different beliefs and values than you do. It's really important to like stand with people and yeah, it's important to stand with people even when they're struggling. I've heard it from several people, even people who are trans and they have questions, and sometimes people will jump down their throat because they're just like curious about things. And other times you have people who are actually like detransitioning and they get pushed out and there's really nothing for them to do. And a lot of times, like for example, I know that a lot of detransitioned like women who like female to male to female, they like resonate with trans femmes and trans females. And I do too in some ways, where with like facial hair and having a complicated relationship with it. Like when I've talked about that before. I don't need to review that again. Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Let's see what else he has to say.
And told that you are a grifter, that you are appealing to your oppressor, and that you are.
So yeah, all the other time is if someone does have a different belief, we oftentimes will like make a lot of assumptions and opinions about them. I'm not saying that like I don't do this. I probably do this a lot actually. Make judgments about people, and yeah, that's a human thing to do. I'm not going to say that I'm going to stop doing that because I'm a person and we make mistakes. But yeah, so kind of like a pick me if you're saying like you're like okay, these are my other beliefs. And I'm not sure exactly. Oh, I think I do know what he's starting to say, but he'll get into that in a second.
Or a turf and so many things. I mean, I've been accused of the whole book, anything that anyone can be accused of, I was accused of. I'm giving into white supremacy, like shit like that. And I've recognized rather quickly that I just don't want to have anything to do with it. Of course, I will, at its core, I will fight for trans rights. I will fight for our rights to be here, exist, and to thrive as human beings. I'm just not going to be doing it next to y'all, next to that group of individuals who just can't seem to tolerate difference in thoughts,
So when he said this, I like, as soon as he said that, I was like, I have to talk about this, because what does it mean to say like, I'm gonna stand for trans rights, but the majority of, I guess the visible majority of trans people on the internet, I'm just gonna like poo-poo them as well. And like, hopefully trans rights will get better because of that. I don't think that that's a good plan. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't see how that can be beneficial. Because the more we say like, oh, that trans person, that's the kind of trans person that's not real, that's not respectable. We start deciding like who's in and who's out. And once we start doing that, we start to blur the lines a lot, and we can start becoming verbally aggressive and violent towards other people and unkind to them because we're frustrated and we just don't agree with their beliefs. I don't think that it's healthy to do a lot of infighting. I think that it's distracting. I think the real things that we're fighting for aren't always going to be changed by being on TikTok and talking about things like that. Sometimes we need to actually get up and talk to people in the real world and make changes in the real world for things that we want to see different. And I would agree that there are people in the trans community who maybe have like lost sight of what our goals are. But I don't know if that means like abandoning the community. And I'm not hating this person particularly. Like I said, I agree with a lot of what he says, and he brings up interesting ideas. But I also do disagree with some things.
There's this idea that if you think remotely different from the trans community, then you are imposing violence against your own people. And it's like, no, I just don't agree with you. And it's really that simple. But
and then he said, I stand with the trans community, but not that part. And he says, I support trans rights and stuff. But my opinion is that he contradicts himself. But
this language that's being developed in the trans community will therefore, in fact, do the very thing that they are afraid of happening to them, which is the idea of dehumanization. You are dehumanizing, I can say it. You are dehumanizing the people who simply have different beliefs than you. Just the fact that I say that a woman is an adult human female and a man is an adult human male, that is blasphemous, the blasphemy.
So now do you understand the connection? So we just got done watching the video from that other woman, the gender critical person, very like TERF type of person, saying that she's standing up for women's rights by kind of being against, just gonna close my window. She's saying she's like being against, like standing up for trans rights, even though clearly standing up for trans rights means standing up for all trans people, not just a select few that you agree with. That's the thing. You don't get to pick and choose which ones get to be free. It's either, yeah, really, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of either all of us or none of us. That's the kind of the situation I think that we're dealing with. Because if we start to move in the direction of a theocracy in our country, we're not going to be able to continue to do what we're doing, by the way. So that's a problem for sure. And also, like, no, there are a couple of transgender folks or even transsexual folks who feel like, well, because I've done these certain surgeries, my chromosomes have changed, and therefore I am a biological male. Like that obviously like isn't if I were to do that, I'm on testosterone, therefore I'm a biological male. I can't, that's not the truth. But it's important to say, like, he knows that he's a man. Like he knows that and he later in the video, he kind of specifies that he's a trans man and that trans part is important. And yeah, that's definitely true. But like functionally, like you are a man in society. It's just, you know what I'm saying? Like it feels a little bit self-invalidating because it's just true that you're a man functioning in society. Yeah, your genitals might tell a different story, or your chromosomes or your things like that might tell a different story, but that doesn't have to do with like your lived experience.
I mean, like that's literally what it is. If you remotely utter such words in the community, if I go into a room full of trans people, I would probably be burned at the stake because of that very statement. That is in fact true.
And I think that's because, and I think that the language here is frustrating because, like, I agree. The majority of women are adult human females. The majority of men, are the opposite or whatever. But it's not a definition that's accurate. I think. Yeah, I don't think it's inaccurate. It's a fully encompassing term. A word is allowed to have multiple definitions, and the words are allowed to be complicated. So, yeah, that's why people get upset. People get upset is because the reason why people get upset is because when you say the whole adult human female thing, it sounds like a gender critical dog whistle. That's what it sounds like. Maybe that's not how you think that it's coming off as, but that's what we hear. That's what I hear. So I hope that I'm wrong, And that's the thing, is like people can have and hold gender critical beliefs and feel content with themselves, and like it doesn't cause them any problems. They feel secure in themselves, and like that's fine, I guess, but kind of frustrating. I think he has like one other point that I wanted to get across, and let me just,
somehow it is deemed blasphemous in the community. And it's the fact that people within the community can't seem to believe that two things can be true at the same time. And I find it quite laughable.
So like that's the thing. I think that if we were to have a conversation, we would probably agree, like functionally, we would agree about how like a trans woman is functionally a woman in society. You know what I'm saying? In the grand scheme of things, you know, if you see like, you know, a quote unquote passing trans woman down the street, that's just where your mind is going to go. I don't think that it's that ridiculous to kind of say, to not, yeah, maybe it's a little bit ridiculous for us to be so like semantic about words and language and like being like, oh, you shouldn't say this or say that, because I don't really think that's useful. And that's the thing, is I'm not really even sure what my goal is here. I don't know what the goal is. Like I'm asking questions. I'm curious, and I just want to know why people think the way that they do. Let me try to think if
that we cannot say that a woman is an adult human instead of this useless imposition, because a lot of trans community is not realizing is that we're that's not what we're fighting for. You know, this is this is kind of like what happened with the BLM movement, and when all the companies out there started like changing the word, like the terminology of certain things, like master bedroom is no longer master bedroom, now it's like primary room or something like that. Like, do you not realize that does nothing towards the movement itself? It does nothing towards actually growing community and people having their rights, or, you know, changing master bedroom to primary room is not going to change the fact that Black people are getting murdered in the middle of the street.
Yeah, exactly. So for example, I'm trying to think of a helpful exact, what's that called, term or like useful swap or something like that. I try to avoid using race examples with gender because I think it triggers things for people. They're helpful because they're both kind of innate things that you can't necessarily the language is difficult, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like things that you can't necessarily change, you know, but people's gender dysphoria does shift, you know, but that's thing. Gender dysphoria can shift, but oftentimes a person's gender, I don't even know. I'm not even sure. Oh man. See this, and that's the thing, guys. This stuff is allowed to be complicated. This stuff is allowed to be confusing. And just because we struggle to understand it doesn't mean we get to say, well, because it's confusing, then let's go with the simplest answer. And that's just the only thing that's true. Sometimes the truth is complex, and it can become more interesting. It can become more easy to understand as time goes on.
Change it. It's the same thing. It's not going to change anything. At the end of the day, it's not all right.
Oh, I forgot. There was one part where he talked about he doesn't agree with the word cis being used. He doesn't think that it's a useful term or something like that, and that we're imposing these words onto other people. I think this is the last of his points that I really want to talk about and review. Crap, that's not what I was trying to do. Well, yeah, so like I just think that like nobody is really no trans person is walking down the street and it's like, you must call yourself cis or refer to yourself as a cis person. The majority of cis people in this world, like maybe they might come in contact with a trans person a couple of times, but I'm sure that a small, you know, if there's 1% of the world is trans, like there's a very small percentage of people who are going to know people and love people who are and have a relationship with people who are trans. And if that's not you, whatever, use whatever language to describe yourself, and don't call yourself cis. Great. You can literally, like, there are people who can literally live their entire lives without learning any of this gender or sexuality related terminology because it just doesn't apply to them. Some of this stuff I feel like is private, not the word cis, but I think like some of the more expansive gender labels are really important for like the internal community, but when like the rest of like the world sees it, that it doesn't make sense to them because they're just not a part of, you know, they're not a part of the queer community as a whole. All right, so okay, what he's saying. So JJ is saying that I believe that we let the powers that be get away with way too much. Being Arab American and non-binary from Florida has gone through the Patriot Act, and it continues to harm our community. Yeah, I get stared at for being Arab and now I get stares for being queer. It's like, how do we allow society to get away with making our lives seem shameful? I don't do the whole appeasement thing. Right. Yeah, because if you're going to go around, and I'm not saying that trans person was doing any of this, like, you know, I don't have any, whatever. I don't really care. And I think that it's very clear that I'm not down for like harassment of other people's channels that I talk about here. And I'm pretty sure no one on my channel is interested in that. I hope at least not. So, yeah, the world needs to get it together, in my opinion. Not us to change for them. Not that you said that. I agree. So I definitely agree. A lot of people are saying, and that other guy, the trans guy, he talked a lot about, we don't want to impose things onto society. We don't want to be, we don't want to like be, like forcing this thing onto other people. And I don't think that we're doing that. We're just like asking for like decency and respect and talking about like what it looks like to respect us if you're interested. Like a lot of the libs of TikTok stuff is just like being like, here is how you use neopronouns if you're interested in using them. And then people who are like, they don't understand it. They're like, haha, you're ridiculous and stupid. And I'm like, okay, but like, that's not for you then. Like that doesn't like, you don't need that then. Let the other people just do what they want to do. I gotta tell you all, I was really close to I don't know, to leaning more towards the gender critical side. But as I did more of the research and like kind of dug deep into it and just listened to other people's opinions, I realized like I would be, kind of leaning into the respectability politics side of things. I don't necessarily, and the thing is, I don't necessarily want this only to be a political issue. I think that there is also like, there should be scientific conversations about the trans brain. Like these are important things to talk about, and we should, share these things with other people. And the thing about like, so for example, that other person, the Godless Snowshoe YouTube channel that I talked about, I believe their opinion is like, you need dysphoria to be trans, but dysphoria, like it doesn't have to be like wicked crazy dysphoria. It's just like even a sense, like a sense of my gender is different is like a form of dysphoria. I believe. I think that's how they describe things. I feel like that makes sense to me. I know that there are other trans people who have an issue with the idea of like dysphoria altogether. I think that's Philosophy Tube made a video talking about gender dysphoria, and they're like, gender dysphoria doesn't exist. And it was a whole dramatic thing in the trans community. I feel like I'm like late to the gender related conversation game. Like a lot of this stuff happened like years ago, when I was like first discovering myself and things like that. But yeah, I was pretty close to kind of being more on like the haha, let's kind of make fun of, cat gender people. And I'm kind of like, you know what? Does that make me any different than the offensive tranny who's making a bunch of videos about me and like, teasing my identity? Does that make me any different? We just kind of are picking on people down the line. That's what it reminds me of. Like the people who don't have any power, clinging onto any power that they can to hurt the people below us, or perceived, who have less social clout, maybe. Yeah. So JJ grew up during 9/11 and they politicized my identity then. And so this stuff with gender politics reminds me of that. I think we just exist and it shouldn't be much of a big deal to cis folks, but meh. I think the punching down. Okay. Sorry about that. Oh yeah, we shouldn't be punching down at all. It's frustrating. It's frustrating that sometimes we feel the need to do that. Sometimes like I would feel better doing that, because it would make me feel more secure in my non-binary identity. I'm a real non-binary. You know what I mean? I have dysphoria. I have bad gender dysphoria. I need medical treatment. So I get to be the voice, for the trans people in the community. And I just don't think that that's true. Because the logical end of all of this gender teasing, all of this, I just can't. I don't want to be associated with the trans community. Oh, there's too much of this. What that leads to is more pain and more like teasing and more what's that called? Not necessarily isolation. More of a disconnect with like what we're actually trying to do here in terms of like talking about why we need treatment, why it's important for people, why it's important for people to talk about these things, and why it's okay to just talk about stuff, and people should be free to share their opinions about their gender without being harassed and policed. It sucks so bad. I just get so frustrated because I think people should be allowed to just say, oh, my gender feels like this, and that's the way that they want to express themselves. Like, why can't people just do that and be allowed to do that? That's frustrating. Okay. Hey Dragon. Okay, consult. I don't know what consult you're talking about, but I'm glad that it went well for you. All right. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk a little bit about, yeah. Why is it political? I really don't know. Okay. Guys, I'm nervous. Okay, I'll talk about this other. Okay, the other thing that really quick. Okay, another thing that I wanted to quickly talk about is at the end of the video, the other trans guy, he mentions that he feels like the trans community has shifted for the worse, and it's become very kind of intense about like identity politics and stuff like that. And he community for to find resources and stuff as he's beginning his transition. And I would agree with that. I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm not super involved in a lot of like circles. And a lot of that is because I think there's a lot of just like chatter about like, is this my gender? And like, what is that? And I think that's fine. There are places where that's important to have like that conversation. But I think for me as a trans person, like what I need from community is like to talk about other things, like how to take care of myself as a trans person, like scar care, what to expect, you know, down the line with testosterone and things like that. Like, though that's what's important about the trans community, is kind of being there to support each other. And I think that we might have lost sight of that. And I think there's also parts of us that have lost sight of that because of the other stuff where people are maybe picking genders that you don't necessarily agree with, and then we can kind of get caught up in the noise there. So Charlie says that I can envision a world where gender isn't dividing us. In that place, you can express your gender as it seems to you and not have the fear and shame that we currently live with. A dysphoria-free world. I would really love that. And I think when we're talking about trans issues, right? You said, I don't know if that'll ever happen. I think it's hard especially for me to see that now. But imagining a world where a person can like even say like, I would like my body to be like this, and I'm comfortable with that. And it's not necessarily out of this place, this violent hatred towards yourself. It's like a deep knowing, like a sense of confidence within yourself that like, this is the body that you'd like to have. Does that always have to be a decision made based off of dysphoria? I'm not sure if it's always useful to wait for that agony. Not saying, I don't know. Yeah. There's a lot of things. Maybe if a person doesn't have any discomfort, they'll never have pain in terms of like transition, or they'll never have dysphoria. But that we don't know that necessarily. The levels of dysphoria for a person, I think, can change and vacillate. Yeah, scar and healthcare. Yeah, for us who are PIPOC, yeah, the intersectionalism is beautiful, and we need to enjoy the community. Like things that are important, like pink nipples. For those of you who are brown and have brown nipples, like mine are half pink, and that was something that I had to learn from the community. And I'm grateful that there were other people of color who taught me that and knew what to expect. And so now, like, I'm gonna pursue nipple tattooing eventually. And so now I know that that's an option, and I know that I can pursue that and kind of like help deal with I do have like some discomfort with the way that they look. Like I don't really like that they're pink. I don't know if I necessarily would call that like gender. I don't know if it's related to a gender part of my body, if it's immediately gender dysphoria, or this is just kind of like, I would like to have my nipples be the same color. Like, I don't know if that would count as dysphoria. Let me know in the comments. Is being uncomfortable with pink nipples dysphoria, or is that just like kind of discomfort? I'm not sure. I definitely think my scars, I have scar dysphoria. That feels more gender related. But it's getting better. It's better than it was like a couple months after the surgery. So that's good.